Sometimes transformation doesn't begin with something dramatic. It begins with a small shift, a subtle awareness, a quiet tension, or a moment that doesn't quite fit anymore. And that small shift, almost easy to ignore, it can quietly begin to change, everything. This episode explores how individual transformation may begin internally and how subtle awareness can shape change over time. When we hear hero's journey, we often imagine leaving home, facing challenges, returning transformed. But the journey doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it begins with noticing differently. Instead of distant adventures, the change is often internal, a tension, a question, a shift in awareness. The hero's journey may not be about leaving home. It may be about noticing differently. The call isn't always loud. It may be discomfort, a thought that lingers, a feeling that something just doesn't align anymore. You may not know what it means yet, only that something has shifted slightly. These moments can be easy to dismiss, but they often mark the beginning of awareness. After the shift, uncertainty often follows. This uncertainty may not be obvious at first. It can feel subtle, like something is internally loosening. Mentally, you may find yourself questioning thoughts that once felt automatic. You may replay conversations or feel unsure about something that once felt very natural. Physically, it may feel like tension in the chest or a slight restlessness, a feeling of being unsettled without knowing why. There may be moments of discomfort or quiet confusion as familiar interpretations begin to feel less certain. This isn't big or dramatic, it's subtle, but it creates space. And that space allows new awareness to emerge. Now, in traditional stories, a mentor appears, but in everyday life, that guidance usually comes internally. Intuition, reflection, symbolic insight. Sometimes it's simply a pause, a moment where you reconsider your response. That pause might reveal a new awareness. You may notice assumptions that you didn't even realize you held. You may see emotional reactions forming earlier than you had seen them before. And this can feel like deconstruction. Beliefs about yourself, beliefs about others, automatic interpretations may begin to fall away. You may question ideas like, I always have to react immediately, or they meant that personally, or I have to defend myself. The pause doesn't give answers, but it creates room for awareness, and awareness begins to guide the journey. And with awareness, patterns begin to appear. You may begin asking, why do I react this way? Why does this situation feel familiar? Why does this tension repeat? Asking why opens space for insight, including your own contribution to the interaction. You may notice how assumptions shape responses, how fear influences tone, and how past experiences form interpretations. This recognition isn't judgment, it's seeing more clearly. And integration happens quietly. You don't become somebody entirely new, you respond slightly differently. Maybe you listen longer, maybe you pause before reacting, maybe you reframe a situation. These are small changes, but they begin to shape experience. For example, you may hold a belief that you need to react immediately. When someone says something, you respond quickly, defensively, or with frustration. Later, you may feel discomfort or reflect on the interaction. Over time, you notice this pattern, and the shift becomes a pause. That pause gives space to reconsider, to reframe, or to empathize. Nothing big or dramatic, just a subtle change in response. And this is where the transformation often happens. Not in the big, giant moments, but in the small adjustments. A calmer tone, a softer interpretation, or a different perspective. These subtle changes accumulate over time. When you respond differently, the interaction changes. Maybe the other person softens. The conversation may shift. This isn't about intentional influence, it's simply interaction changing. The journey isn't linear. You may revert and you may notice again. You may even find yourself in long periods of embodying this shift, only to have a single day where the old reaction reappears. This doesn't erase the change, it's part of the process. Growth happens in overlapping moments, not straight lines. Each awareness builds familiarity with the new response and with yourself. Now, psychologist Albert Bandura described how behavior can shift through observation and gradual reinforcement. And research in cognitive psychology shows that small behavioral adjustments repeated over time can reshape emotional responses and habitual thinking. Over time, these subtle adjustments can influence perception and your interactions. Not big, not dramatically, but steadily. If transformation begins with small shifts, then subtle awareness matters. Making one shift may naturally lead to another. Not big change, just noticing. You may begin to understand why you react. You could pause more often or show up differently for yourself. And by extension, you show up differently in the world around you. If you'd like to explore what awareness you may be experiencing and your small shifts, I do have a download available. I'll make sure the information's there. But the hero's journey may not begin with leaving home. Actually, you may not go outward at all, but inward. Noticing differently. A subtle awareness, a quiet tension, a small shift. And from that subtle change, transformation may begin quietly. So, what small shift might be starting in your own awareness? But I'll leave that for you to think about. Thank you for being here with me and for helping me take the occult and the apocalypse and just see it as the hidden and the revealed. Be sure to come back next week because we're going to be starting a mini episode arc on how your small shifts might be impacting the greater world around you. I'll see you there.